Here are the list of the 5 unbeaten teams. Raise your hand if you thought any of these teams would be unbeaten through last weekend.
Only Oregon would be the one I would have said.
All right, Craig?
Only Oregon.
I always believed in BYU. I called this. I totally was behind the Cougars. Knew they were going to run the Big 12. And no, did not see this from BYU. Did not see this from Army. Definitely not Indiana. Miami, I mean, not necessarily, but that one's not, I think, incredibly surprising because look at their schedule. Like, it's not, when you go and pick up Cam Ward, like it was some massive mountain to climb. So that one's not that surprising. And quite frankly, Oregon's not that surprising. That really boils down to who won the Ohio State-Oregon game. So somebody was going to be undefeated. So those top 2, I don't think are all that off. And I think you'd had quite a few people probably would have picked at least one of those, especially Oregon. But the other 3 certainly did not expect that whatsoever.
Oregon had Ohio State somewhat early. It wasn't like immediately, but that was one that probably would have kept me from thinking, but not like it was out of the realm. And so there we are with that. Here is the top 25, which had some shake-up in some ways because 2 Big 12 teams, Iowa State and K-State, get knocked out. A&M enjoyed the top 10 for a week, and they reverted back to some bad habits, and also some news on their running back in a moment, Le'Veon Moss. So there we are with the top 25. BYU now 9. K-State and Iowa State both dropped. You see Louisville moves in. Pitt falls. Vanderbilt, of course, there they are with a win against Auburn. Colorado up a little bit. Clemson drops. A lot of that going on. And look at Boise State now at number 12.
Yeah, Boise State, I'm this close to picking them to win a playoff game. I don't even care who they play. Like, they're fun. But A&M, sometimes you can't change your spots, and you go and beat LSU, the biggest win, and put yourself in first place in the SEC alone, and the SEC alone, and then you said, you know what, it's lonely up here. Let's lose a game and create a logjam and have people thinking, okay, it's still A&M. Now, they have no reason not to beat New Mexico State and Auburn and be 9-2 when they play Texas. But that was not a second half that they want to remember at all.
Yeah, my hater observation here is that you have a team in the good old SEC that finally drops out, and what happens?
Oh, yeah.
As Missouri goes out of the polls. Here comes Vanderbilt back after a 1-week absence.
Yeah.
And then you get to say, well, there's 8 ranked teams, and it's everybody, and it's just like, man, it's like clockwork, buddy. The way that just always gets molded to where there's never really any losses. Like, there's a team always replaces another team, it feels like. So, yeah, Vandy's back in the poll. I mean, good for them. But it was just funny to see that the moment an SEC team actually drops out for once with Missouri, and then here comes another one just to replace them, and nothing changes. It's just it's comical. So I'll say this. Last week I defended the AP poll. AP poll can get the hell on out of here. You're talking, you and I are just never going to agree on the importance of polls, because now all that matters, you're saying don't get worked up, telling people who are clearly going to get worked up by the polls, like, thanks, Dad, but we're not. Like
I didn't say the polls.
The playoff rankings. You told people not to get worked up. They're absolutely going to get worked up over the playoff polls because it's the first playoff polls. It's the official polls. So the AP poll.
You're right, but there's no reason to get worked up because just let this thing ride. But if you have a team involved, you're going to get very worked up.
So, if you got a team involved, of course you're going to get worked up. Like, to say don't get worked up is not going to do any good, because you're absolutely going to do that. And I'm interested to see how with 12 teams that actually works, because you're going to have, 6, 7, 8 times the amount of people that do get worked up over it. So, yeah, I mean, the AP poll's fine and dandy, and it had its place and has its place. But now I'm glad this week we can all turn to the playoff rankings and just start to hate those. And, everybody, I expect, will react to some kind of way to those rankings when they drop tomorrow.
All right. By the way, yes, they've been meeting, the College Football Playoff Committee. They'll have the release tomorrow, which is the most important polls. That's the most important votes are tomorrow. Tomorrow is the College Football Playoff standings. Penn State losing to Ohio State, had a 10-0 lead, home, massive crowd, and I never trusted them. And I was like, no, Ohio State did. And then they get down inside the 5 and they cannot score. Here are a couple of notes on James Franklin. 1-10 against Ohio State. 1-14 against top 5 opponents. I bet a lot of records for some programs or coaches against the top 5, not much better. But 3-18 against the top 10, 13-27 against all ranked opponents with James Franklin as the head coach. And then on top of that, it's not like it's just him. Penn State is 1-23 since 2000 against the top 5, 1-13 against the AP top 5. And then Penn State now has lost 8 straight to Ohio State. Coaches get fired if they don't beat, and I know Penn State has Pitt. They get fired if they don't beat the people they have to beat. Osborne didn't get fired, but he was under the gun in the late 70s. We know Texas and OU coaches can get fired if you don't beat Oklahoma or you don't beat Texas. Auburn and Alabama. That is the way it is, and he has just struggled. Not a lot of people have beaten Ohio State. We got to say that, but you got to win at least a couple of more of those 3 games.
Sometimes you do. I mean, like, you got to do it sometimes. They don't. And he, not only that, they play their, like, the most boring games against those teams. Now, they'll turn around and they got Maryland or somebody, they'll score 38 against Maryland in a quarter. And then you'll be like, well, I know that Ohio State's better, but, like, where is this dynamic play calling? What happens against Ohio State? Look, Ryan Day's under the gun because he can't win big games, right? And he's been more successful than James Franklin has.
And he can't beat Michigan.
And he can't beat Michigan. Yeah. Right. Well, James Franklin,
lately.
I think he deserves some of the scrutiny. And look, he got in a fan's face, which is the stupidest thing for a coach to do. Bro, you make $10 million. $10 million. You get $10 million because occasionally a-holes are going to say some things to you. All right? That's why you get $10 million. You get $10 million, and like I'm not defending the guy. That was rude, but no way. Like, you gotta start winning some of these games.
By the way, Paul, Craig, go ahead and say what you just said. I thought Pittsburgh and Penn State play quite a bit. They don't.
They barely ever play. I mean, they've played twice since 2000, or 3. Let's see, 1, 2. They played 4 times since 2000. That's nowhere close to the rivalry you were indicating. But yeah, no, I get what you were going for there, but those don't apply there. Paul said it. You said it. You got to beat your rivals, and James Franklin has been incapable of beating the rivals, beating the big teams in the big games, and taking that next step as a program for, going on a really long time now at this point. It's been you go back 5-6 years, and this same storyline was out there.
And it's like the same thing.
Yeah. I don't know. And, it was a bad look on Saturday all the way around. An awful loss, awful aftermath of it, and it's an awful taste in your mouth if you're a Penn State fan. And just you've got to wonder when this is ever going to change. And this team that's pretty good every single year is finally able to take that next step up the mountain and conquer it at some point. But they just cannot get over that last stage of, beating the biggest teams and rattling all that together. So, in this playoff era, I'm sure we'll see Penn State get in there plenty of times as like the 3rd seed out of the Big Ten or whatever, but their inability to be the number 1 seed in the Big Ten and to beat mighty Michigan, beat mighty Ohio State, so on and so forth, that has long been a problem, and it's only growing larger to the point of you could win 10 games a year, but those couple that you don't win are going to cost you your job. And that's unfortunate for James Franklin, but that's the reality of being a big-time college football coach.
Let me ask you this. Let's just say, because I just said this about Boise State. If Boise State plays Penn State in the playoff, who are you picking? I'm picking Boise State more than likely, and it's because the big games they show up. I will pick anybody who plays Penn State in the playoff, and they're going to fall ass backwards into the thing because their schedule sucks.
Yeah.
So
this was
they're going to lose to Ohio State.
Yeah.
They're going to fall ass backwards into the playoff, and there's going to be a couple teams with maybe 3 losses that deserve to be in above them just because they're better teams and played better people.
Well, it's a great debate. Fong Wei Reldman saying that no way 3-loss teams should be ranked ahead of BYU. There's only 1-loss teams that are ranked ahead of them, and not many because they're at number 9 right now. But yeah, the college football standings, you might see multiple loss teams still be a part of that first one that's released tomorrow night. Now,
yeah, that's like you said. Don't worry about no. You absolutely have to worry about the first one if you're in there. You have to see where you're positioned because that thing doesn't change dramatically. And so, to his point, you've got Penn State at number 6 in the rankings at 7-1 now. But I don't know what's he referring to about the 3 losses? Like an Alabama, maybe?
I think he was more joking.
Okay. Well, yeah.
Because there's nobody with 2 losses ranked ahead of him either.
No, but Bama's 2 spots behind with 2 losses.
Yeah.
But I thought he was actually referring to somebody in general. But no, I don't think that's a concern whatsoever. But yeah, you do need to pay close attention to those sets, the way they set it up tomorrow night.
All right, fight on. Is anyone going to give me kudos for picking Texas Tech to upset Iowa State? Everyone in the chat said I was crazy. No, congratulations. Absolutely. Here we go. How about this? Not only a massive win for Tech, especially after the couple of losses they had, they are hosting the Big Noon Kickoff show in Lubbock. Colorado is in town. That has a lot to do with it, too. But Texas Tech winning that game makes that even more reason to do it. Huge win for Joey McGuire. Their running back, Taj Brooks, joins us in about an hour or so. But a massive win that has scrambled the brains of who may play for the Big 12 championship game if BYU keeps winning. Because the other game that happened was Houston beating K-State. I mean, now you have this scrambled eggs theory. And BYU now trying to stay above all of the crazy.
Yeah, I'll give Tech massive amounts of credit for going to Ames and winning that game. I think Iowa State had been playing with a little bit of fire here these last 2-3 weeks and still winning games, finding ways to win games, but having to squeak by like UCF. And I think that it finally caught up to them, just kind of the way that they were playing. Certainly did not expect it to be this weekend. With Texas Tech, I think that you absolutely are head over heels with the response to the last stretch of games that have been pretty brutal losses after pretty brutal losses, and then also just all the noise last week with the helmet communications and the fact that Tech, even from its own fans, took some flack for making that as public as they did. And I know there's people that have put their feet in the ground and demanded inquiry and all this other stuff, but in general, you did take some bad PR from that, and you wonder how a team responds to all of those things, and they responded really well. Now, I will say this. It's not like they went out and played some great game. So you think hey, if Texas Tech goes to Iowa State and wins that game and upsets them after losing, a couple big games in a row, they must have gone out there and just played their asses off, right? I think they played really hard. I don't think they played necessarily extremely well. I don't think Iowa State obviously played extremely well, but Texas Tech made the plays to win that game, and so I give them a lot of credit for that. They can definitely play better than that, but they played well enough to win on Saturday, and that's all that matters, and that was a huge win for a variety of different reasons, from just the program itself enjoying a big win like that, a big top 25 road win, which has evaded them, and what that means, getting bowl eligible, what that means, but also kind of throwing it back in the faces, because I said last week, I was like, you better go play well this weekend. With all that talk, you better go out and not lay an egg against Iowa State. Well, they didn't lay an egg. They hatched a new one, and that was the best response that you could have had to the last couple of weeks. So, yeah, that was a big, big win for Joey McGuire and the Red Raiders.
And all of a sudden, Baylor is on a 3-game winning streak, and I could not have seen this. Golly, it got to the point where I'd rather have picked up a snake for about a month, really almost for a couple of years. Baylor hosting the team that has owned them in TCU. Baylor had not beaten them at home since 2014, 61-58. TCU had found every way from dominance to ugly to finding a way to kick a field goal in 2022 with the clock running down, and just owned the rivalry. And then all of a sudden, Saturday night, this is Ted Harrison. He's a Baylor graduate who put this as like a 2-minute clip together on the almost identical type finish from 2014, from a run by Shock Linwood to the kick by Chris Callahan to the run by Bryson Washington. It was huge, to the kick by Isaiah Hankins.
Because a vision softly creeping left its seeds while I was sleeping, and the vision that was planted in my brain still remains within the sound of
Thanks to Ted for putting that together. The matching of the run by Shock Linwood, where they shoved him for about 8 to 10 yards, compared to Bryson Washington, where they shoved him for 8 to 10 yards, setting up almost identical length field goals with no time left but other than the kick. Appreciate him doing that. Listen, and I can't remember, I guess we all, maybe in the text, the last time that Baylor had a win at home that mattered, and again, it's beating a team in TCU that was just above 500, was Oklahoma and Caleb Williams in 2021. Am I right? It had been that long. I mean, a legitimate, important win against a quality opponent, even though TCU's not great at home.
No, TCU is not great, but does that matter? They've lost to not great TCU teams when they've been better. Yes. Like, they needed to beat TCU. They needed to get a big win at home. They've got a 3-game winning streak now. Their coach was on the hot seat. I feel pretty good in saying that he's more or less off of it now, especially if they win another couple games, which they totally should, given the schedule they have coming down and the way they've been playing. That was it wasn't the absolute prettiest game, but there weren't turnovers. They didn't do a lot of stupid things. There were some penalties, a ref show for a while, but for the most part, they kept pace. They kept in it. They made good decisions. They made good plays. The coaching was really good all the way around, I thought, given where they are. You know what? Like, this was huge for Dave Aranda, for the players, for confidence, for the student body. I know that, rushing the field when you beat a 4-4 team is not normally the thing, but you got to understand that, they've been, passing kidney stones, in the stands for, 2 years now. That's what it's felt like it's been watching the game. So when they've got some relief, some joy, go and take it.
Yeah,
this is from me, Mr. Field Storming Curmudgeon. Yeah. Go and do it. They earned that.
That fan base, the young students especially that had not seen that in a long time, enjoyed the moment. Craig?
Yeah, it was an excellent win. It was a really entertaining game. I think if you were just a bystander watching that, you probably walked away feeling like you watched a pretty fun football game. Lots of scoring, lots of big plays, lots of back and forth, lead changes and ties, and then obviously a walk-off at the end. So that was just a really fun college football game with a good atmosphere. And it had been, 10 years since they'd won a big game against TCU at home. So, you say it's been 2 years or whatever since they won a big game at home. It's been however long since they beat TCU. It's been 10 years since they beat TCU at home.
Yep.
That's their blood rival. It's one of the protected rivalries in the Big 12 that was put to the side. And, here's one of our main rivalries. And it was a very one-sided rivalry the last 10 years. So they needed that in just that way, but Dave Aranda needed that. This team needed that for bowl eligibility purposes, for big picture, looking into the future purposes. I don't think it just cools off everything and, you can start planning for 2025 already necessarily, but I do think it's cooled off things immensely. You still got to use the fire extinguisher a little bit more to get any of the little remaining flickers. And so we'll see, but I think it leads you into a really positive bye week where you won 3 straight games in your second leg of the season, and you put yourself in a position where you could win up to 8 games and feel really confident about your ability to do that, and certainly feel confident about your ability to win one more and get to the postseason. So they've flipped the script on this season in the last month. I think part of that's just the team getting better every week, and it's also the schedule easing up from having played BYU, Iowa State, and Colorado, 3 of arguably the best teams in the league, all in the very front of the schedule, to give them an 0-3 hole. And they should have beat Colorado, as we all know. So I think that this team's just progressing and getting better and finding its identity and learning how to win close games, and that was the biggest close game win they've had in a really, really long time.
It was the fans stayed locked in. There was a time, I don't know when, maybe third quarter, maybe even the first half at one point where I thought, man, they need something to happen. Third quarter when Sawyer Robertson, who's on a great roll, hit Monterey Baldwin for a pass. It would have been short of a first down. He slid around a couple of defenders and picked up a lot of yards. And it kind of they were teetering on getting a little bit bored or not engaged, and so they were, and they win. Also, Houston, I mentioned, knocking K-State out of maybe any type of college football playoff. They're going to have to win and get to the Big 12 championship and win that too. Mike Gundy, after the loss,
I got to talk about it. I mean, that's a massive win for Willie Fritz.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's I got to say something. Sorry.
Yeah.
That was a massive win for Willie Fritz. I mean, this Houston team's just found ways to win games and doing so mostly by terrific defense and a little play here and there on offense. And on Saturday night, that was Zion Chris with the big run there towards the end of the game, but going 11 for 11 passing and just doing enough offensively. Even Donovan Smith getting there in, short, tough yardage types of situations, using his big body in a wise way. They scraped enough together in that regard to do what they needed to do offensively. That defense is terrific.
Yep.
It shut K-State's ass down in the run game, which not many teams are capable of doing, and they made plays late, and that's one, if you're Kansas State, it's just an ugly game. There's no chance that you thought that was any type of an upset potential, and yet Houston did it again. I mean, almost did it to Oklahoma earlier in the year, and now they've won, 3 Big 12 games at this point, which there's no way anybody would have predicted that, even the biggest Willie Fritz loyalists.
Yeah, 3-6 overall with a win here or there and maybe an upset, but now they've won those pretty
4 and
consistently.
5.
Yeah.
They got a chance to go to a bowl game.
Yeah.
I know it's crazy, but they do. So that was a massive win. And for K-State, that, you could still technically win the Big 12, but your at-large chances are out the roof entirely as far as the college football playoff goes. Your only path to the playoff now is to go win the Big 12, and you're going to need help to do that. So that was a really bad loss, but give Houston a lot of credit.
By the way, rushing yardage for K-State, 89 yards on 34 carries. Avery Johnson did not protect the football, including a pick at the end of the game that sealed the win for Houston. Oklahoma State has not won a Big 12 game. I told you about the stat. The only time that Mike Gundy has ever had a losing season was his first year when he took over from Les Miles. From after the game, Gundy, we need to do a better job of coaching. In my opinion, I'm not so sure I agreed with our schemes. I put that up as is he trying to call out his coordinators? And I had a couple of Oklahoma State fans that told me he's really more of a CEO, and a lot of coaches are, but I thought it depends on how you want to take that. But Oklahoma State hasn't won a damn game in the conference.
Look, I'm watching them in person 2 weeks ago now, and then watching them as I have, they're just bad. They're a bad team. They're not talented on defense, and they lost the best players that they did have on that side of the ball. Their offensive line has way underachieved, and I've seen that, there's probably 3 or 4 teams this year going into the summer thought, man, we've got 100 starts on the offensive line. This is great. So happy to have that bag, or, however many they had combined. All these guys, 4th, 5th-year seniors, been in the program for a while. They know the offense. This is going to be great. And then they come out and they can't do anything. They've got a great player in Ollie Gordon who's really done nothing. They've got, and it's because the offensive line's been bad. They didn't do anything about quarterback for one reason or the other. And that's really hurt them in the long run. By far the worst Gundy team I've ever seen. And I have no doubt that he'll figure out a way next year, but this team is they're just in a bottomless pit.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the stuff about his coordinators, I've heard him talk that way about his coordinators in nearly every press conference, especially after losses. So I don't think that was anything unique or eyebrow raising in any way. He typically does that. So that doesn't set off alarm bells, but certainly losing 6 straight does, and losing 3 of those games at home when Stillwater's normally this fortress in the Big 12 along the lines of old Morgantown or now Provo, and you go toughest places to play. For a long time, it felt like Stillwater was that way. Well, it's not now. I mean, there's nothing all that tough about this football team. He had a comment today because now they're losing, so it's anything you say is going to go under the microscope more. And he had an interview where he's talking about how basically losers are the ones sitting back and complaining about stuff like his football team losing, like people who can't pay their own bills. And I'm not making up that verbiage. That's the kind of verbiage he was using. So you can go listen to the clip for yourself and take it how you want to. I don't take things super sensitively, in that manner. So I was just kind of yeah, I understand what he's trying to say. I also understand how it's being taken completely negatively by a lot of people. But yeah, Mike, when you lose 6 straight, people are going to bitch. People are going to have problems with it. That comes with the territory, multimillionaire head coach. But I feel like he's in such a cush position that this is just water off his back, it's, all right, well, it is what it is. We just won't make a bowl game, and we'll just go into next year, and his job's not in danger, and it's just football coaching. And, to him, it's not what it is to Wet Blanket or to any of the other Oklahoma State fans out there who are taking this way worse than him. But, yeah, they're bad. They got their asses kicked by Arizona State.
They got scatterbooed, right, Paul?
Yeah, scatterbooed or scatterboomed.
Yeah, well, he's hurt now, so we'll see what his status is for this week, according to Kenny Dillingham. He's on the – we'll see.
Well,
so he's banged up coming out of that, but he was Big 12 Offensive Player of the Week worthy, and he got that honor today, and he was amazing with 100-plus yards on the ground and in the air. Bunch of score. Like, he was great, and he flashed and was certainly a guy that I was walking away going, there's a couple guys I saw on Saturday night that I'm putting first team all Big 12, and Cam Scadaboo is one of them, and Savion Williams is another. I just got to figure out where to put Savion Williams because he's kind of
where you put him under the position of beast.
Utility or something, but no, Scadaboo's awesome, and Oklahoma State right now is not, and I'm very interested in what moves are made. I know play caller and things like that will be at the top of the list, so we'll see what they do. Certainly they're going to have a change at quarterback. Ollie Gordon will be gone to the NFL, so they're going to be in revamp mode, but this is a bad year, and they can still technically go to a bowl game, but it would mean beating TCU on the road, beating Tech at home, and then going and beating Colorado on the road. So the odds of that are pretty slim to none.
That's just like when the talk was of if Baylor was ever going to get bowl eligible, just win a game first. They got to win a game. By the way, BU Patrick Scadaboo, Player of the Week over Washington. Yep, he had over 100 yards, both rushing and receiving. Washington was the offensive newcomer of the week in the Big 12.
Yeah, and with that, I think Baylor's got, I don't know, I guess they haven't had a defensive newcomer maybe, I don't know, but I think they might have got the main sweep of special teams, offense, defense. Yeah. Washington still got honored. He just got the newcomer, but you can kind of understand it when you see Scadaboo's numbers.
He's
everybody got a little bit of the pie. He just didn't get that main offensive player of the week, but Scadaboo had a pretty deserving game. So.
We have Ari Temkin at 340, so let's get to a few more of these stories today. This is from Dusty Lair on Twitter to me. I believe this might have been either late Saturday night or sometime on Sunday. This is, by the way, the graphics that Paul put together for a lot of the topics and tweets are beautiful. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
I love the show. Mondays, you guys go over the top 25. We've done that. SEC is 8, 26th and 27th as well. You three often comment about how high SC teams get ranked, but curious, who's the team you all think should be ahead of these 10 SEC teams that keeps rotating spots? I don't know of anybody else in the Big 12 that should be. Well, first of all, they got BYU, Iowa State, Kansas State, and also Colorado are 4 ranked in the top 25. I don't know how many of them should be ahead of those first 3 or 4 that are in the top 25, but Paul, Craig, whose team, Big 12, should be ahead of any of those 10? Well, 4 of them are in the from the SEC that keep rotating spots. I thought Missouri was a fraud after A&M had beaten them and maybe before A&M had smoked them.
They're out now. So
I was surprised South Carolina wasn't 12th this week. I really was. And they, by the way, beat A&M up in that particular game.
Well, you make a very good point because the way the season has gone, I mean, the teams that would have arguments do that, like a lot of them lost this past week. I mean, you're looking at it's kind of hard to say because who should be ahead of these 10 teams? Well, the 10 teams vary, right? Like, I'm not saying that people should be above Georgia or in front of, Texas. But I do think when you're rotating Vanderbilt, South Carolina, Kentucky, like all those teams have had a little taste and you're kind of rotating them on the back end, that's where I've mostly taken issue to where it's like it never drops off. Like every time a team drops out, a team replaces them. And what's the example this week? Vanderbilt did it, right? Yeah. So that's more or less what I get is like the total number of teams and how you always have the benefit of this argument of we've got this many teams and we've played this many teams because it never changes. It's always 7 or 8, no matter who loses and who wins because team drops, team jumps in. But you make a very valid point, and this year is the hardest year to put up a good argument of who should be above because all of the other peripheral teams out there from across the leagues, on that back end at least, K-State goes and loses the way that they did on Saturday, so there's not really a great argument to be had. I do feel like it's kind of it's self-contained to where you never
It's a
Drop to
bubble.
5
How many
ranked
times?
teams.
How long have I been saying it's
A bubble.
Now, hold
yeah.
on one thing. Nobody that's not ranked in the Big 12 should be.
No.
Nobody. There's no argument. Texas Tech, Arizona State, nobody that is in the Big 12 should be ranked inside the top 25. Maybe they'll get there, but none of them right now deserve to be a part of that list.
But I would argue that maybe a BYU should be higher.
Sure.
And so if that means they jumped over at Tennessee or something, I know people, well, they beat Alabama. I'm not going to argue with you about it. I'm just saying that there are spots where you go, why is this team just hovering and not moving but one spot over the last month, whereas there's others just jumping around at 7 spots. And so I think it's just a matter of, like, when's BYU going to get that respect and put in closer to the top 5 as an 8-0 team who's beat SMU at SMU, who beat the dog mess out of Kansas State. Like, they're getting no love.
They are with some of the computers, and that might affect tomorrow.
Right.
Vanderbilt has beaten Alabama.
Yeah.
Beaten Kentucky, which is a team that's this year's going to end up around that 500. Lost to Texas by just 3. But they lost to Georgia State. Like that game doesn't count. And so the narrative, and it's not just the SEC, but the name you hear about, well, yeah, they beat somebody. The losses should count too. And they also lost to Missouri, who was very highly overmodulated and ranked in the top 25.
I'll tell you the only, like, if you want to take a Big 12 team and put them over some other ones, look, Iowa State just took their first loss. It was by a point. Like, everybody's got a loss. They took a loss to Texas Tech, who's 6-3. Not unlike Alabama losing to, say, South Carolina. Like, that's a very similar loss to me. So why are they 6 spots behind Alabama when they've played really well all year long? I think they should be.
They dropped 6 spots.
Why does Ole Miss jump over Iowa State with 2 losses? Like, those are the types of things.
Those are the things that happen.
Yeah, those are the types of things you start saying, we got this many of the top 15. You're like, so Iowa State just lost their first game. Ole Miss has already lost twice, and they are back over Iowa State already. Like that. Like, that's the kind of stuff that we're talking about more or less.
Not only that,
than
Greg, but 14, 15, and 16 are also LSU, A&M, and Ole Miss. Yeah.
So that's the kind of stuff that we're getting at. And then, I mean, I use the example at the very beginning. You know, Missouri finally falls out, finally, and then here comes Vanderbilt again. And it's just kind of, it's hilarious how that sort of works, where you never waver and having 7, 8 teams at all times. But yeah, I mean, you have a very valid point. There's not a great argument from a lot of the rest of the country right now because a lot of people are beating up on each other.
In the AP, the number 26 and 27 are in Missouri and South Carolina. I'm not joking. I thought South Carolina would jump up with the win because they dominated A&M, who was the hot flavor last week. All right, so there we are with that. One note, we will get to, let's do this. We'll put the Aston Gente later, okay, Garrett? Let's get to the 2 injuries. Florida quarterback DJ Lagway, in their game, they were giving Georgia everything they had. He went out. There were thoughts that he might be out for an extended period of time. Now it appears as if he's good to go against Texas in what should be a fun game. Texas a heavy favorite down in Austin. He gives them and may have saved Billy Napier's job.
I mean, we'll see. I mean, they've got Texas, Ole Miss, and LSU down the stretch. I don't know if it's in that exact order, but those are the 3 teams they have. They're in Austin this week in a game that will make me have to shower just for thinking about it. But I'm going to Gulf Shores, Alabama. My friends are going to be like, "Oh, what are you doing?" I'm like, "Texas and Florida are playing this weekend." So I think that Billy Napier has at least kept his head above water so far at 4-4. He's saying DJ Lagway is going to play. It's a hamstring injury. Those things don't just heal quickly. Also, here's what I worry about. DJ Lagway could save Billy Napier's job, so Billy Napier might try to push him out there faster because the kids are always going to want to play. But what will also hurt your job is if the best player you've had in a long time tears his freaking hamstring because you pushed him out there faster.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, they don't have him. Their chances just plummet. You're going to a young quarterback in Aiden Warner who had some struggles the other night in replacing Lagway. So, yeah, don't love Florida's odds this weekend if no DJ Lagway. But I know there's probably some gamesmanship involved here. Hopefully he does have a great chance to play and is able to get cleared and be a part of it. But even then, I still don't know how much of a difference he really makes versus Texas, honestly. So this Texas schedule, honestly, has been kind of disappointing.
Texas is up to 21.5-point favorite in some of the
games. So it's like, what does it matter, really? But, I mean, he is a better player. He's the best option they have. So you'd like to, like I said last week, and this is always my my feeling on any injuries. I want the best to play the best, and I don't like it when the best teams are playing a lesser version of what should be a much better team. So you'd love to have Lagway healthy, but I was just saying about Texas, it just feels like that schedule doesn't have the dynamite I felt like it would have. It did with Georgia, but like you get this Florida game and the quarterback's hurt, and just I don't know. I just feel like there's some explosion missing here because of injuries and just the way.
But the Vanderbilt game thought to be a ho-hum.
Yeah, that worked out better.
That turned out to be.
But this Florida game doesn't turn out to be nearly as big of a deal as you thought. Although it'll be cool to see these two teams play. But, yeah, I hope Lagway can get healthy somehow. I still think Texas wins this going away.
They're 3 touchdown favorites, and they've had an off week, too, to kind of maybe take a deep breath and correct a few things and get healthy themselves. Le'Veon Moss, hell of a player. A&M was on top of the college football, at least the SEC standings, after beating LSU. Le'Veon Moss against South Carolina. He is the ever-ready battery, or whatever you call Energizer battery. Mm-hmm. He is now, after a thought or two from Elko that it may not be as bad as they think, Carter Corrals, with this story, out for the year with A&M coming off the loss to South Carolina. So there we are with those players and those injuries.
Yeah, that's a bummer for A&M. And look, they're already down Ruben Owens. This means Amari Daniels has to step up. We'll see more from E.J. Smith, I would think, because he's going to have to do – I mean, he's been out there in spots because he's a good pass blocker, but they might have to give him the ball more. I wouldn't be surprised to see them get creative with Terry Bussey as well in this regard, maybe giving him the ball.
Respectfully, E.J. Smith's not going to provide much in terms of actual numbers whatsoever.
You're going to see more of him out there, though. Because,
but you're not going to notice it much unless you're just watching blocking and stuff, because he's not a numbers guy. He's not a producer like Le'Veon Moss. So that's a big loss for A&M. There's no sugarcoating. That's a huge loss for them. And a really tough break and a tough loss this past weekend that I don't know how much you really saw it coming. But that was a bitter pill to swallow for Mike Elko and company, as South Carolina just kind of put it on them. But yeah, that's a double whammy, because you've got you got A&M coming up. Here comes this injury to Le'Veon Moss, one of their best players. But regardless, that's tough for A&M, and he had a great year going, and he was on our Earl Award list 2 or 3 times already, and so I hope he gets healthy soon.